So we are finishing up our series on leading well. And today we're looking at problem solving. And not just like everyday stuff. I'm talking like change the world stuff, like figure it out, like global scale. But when you think about who we are as a human race in 2023, May specifically, like, who are we? Like, we have been so dialed into, there's so much information that is like seconds away from your fingertips. That if you know me, if you've talked to me and had any conversation with me over the last 10 to 15 years, you can ask me any question in the world, and I'm generally going to say, I don't know, figure it out. Because that pretty much solves everything. Because whatever question you're asking, there's an answer seconds away. I'll be on trips and I'll bring people with me and they'll come up to me and they'll say, Paul, where's the bathroom? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I've never been in this building before. Go figure it out. Like, it's not that hard. Walk around till you find a sign that says bathroom. In any language, they all look the same. Figure it out. Paul, where do you think we should? I don't know. Figure it out. And sometimes I know the answer, but it cheapens it. If you don't go through the journey of figuring it out on your own. So yes, I could answer you. No, I don't want to. But if you also think about like how we exist as humans, like it's sometimes there's this disconnect in information. I walked around the office this week and I said to people, I'm a world-class problem solver. I'll answer any question you want, anything. And I walked into one of the first offices. I looked at the girl that was sitting there. I said, I'm a world-class problem solver. Give me any question in the world, anything you want. She stared at me for a second. And then she said, how tall are giraffes? I'm like, the whole world of questions are at your fingertips. I'm standing before you here right now, making a commitment to solve your problem. And you want to know how tall giraffes are. 3-second Google search. They're between 16 and 18 feet. Every now and then they get up to 20 feet. Any other questions? No. Okay, thank you very much. Now, to take it to a little bit of a deeper level, I'm open right now because you all get to sit there and stare at me and I have to do all the work. So I would like to ask you a question. So if any question in the world, anything you have. Yes, Alan, go ahead. What was your question? Lunch. Have you ever been scared? Yeah, like 30 seconds before I walked on stage. On a regular basis, fear is a part of my life, yes. Another question over here, anything? Food? Where would you like to eat lunch? That's an excellent question. Thank you for answering that. If you think about lunch even, like you could take it down to the most basic of questions. Best place to eat near me, boom. And then 10 things pop up. And then you have 10 people's opinion. And then you look at the opinions and you say, that person, they don't know anything. They're wrong, swipe. It's so easy to figure things out. And yet, it's so hard to process through life sometimes with some of those problems that seem beyond our heaviness, our weight, our understanding. When I was in my first or second sixth grade, 1981, 1982, don't worry about it, we'll talk about it next week. Social media started. Like, people aren't aware of this, but social media, it started to blow up. It looked exactly like this. You see, what happened is some guy invented this, and then people would stare at it for weeks. Like, just weeks upon weeks. They'd walk around, and all they would be doing is looking at this Rubik's Cube, trying to figure out how to solve it. If somebody solved it, you held it up, and you showed everyone in the room, I just solved the Rubik's Cube. You instantly had 1 million followers, like just like that. Until you showed one of the people in your circle how to solve it. And then they left you, and they took some of your friends and followers with them, and they were now the power because potentially they could teach you how to solve it. And I remember all I wanted to do was solve this thing, and I'd spin it in circles and try, and I'd get close. Do you ever get the top done, and then just this top right here, and then it's chaos underneath? And I remember once I got the top and then a T on each side, and I was like, that's probably good enough. Let's just call it a day. And I remember thinking, like, when a lot of people are looking this way trying to solve a problem, I have a tendency to turn and look the other way. And I know I'm not alone on this, but those of you that couldn't solve the problem, you probably turned it like this. And then when you got it right there, you put your fingers right here, and you pulled as hard as you could till the thing exploded. Now you got pieces all over the ground. All you have to do is pick up those pieces and shove them back together as hard as you can. It's a little loosey-goosey after you do that, but you solved the Rubik's Cube. So I went to school and I told everybody, I showed them, I solved the Rubik's Cube. And they knew me, and they said, Paul, this is your second sixth grade year. We understand that you didn't solve this on your own. I'm like, I solved it. I finished the puzzle. They're like, did you do this when you solved it? And I said, no. I threw it on the ground and stepped on it and stomped on it, and it blew apart. And I also did it like this and pulled it. But I put it back together, and I solved the problem. Okay, Paul. You see, with the Rubik's Cube, though, is there anybody that knows how to do this? Like, oh, of course, the engineer that went to Africa with me knows how to solve the Rubik's Cube. You got lucky, I almost gave it to you. You got 26 minutes. Don't interrupt me till then. But I'll also forget you have it, so remind me. He's not going to hear anything of the sermon now. Nobody in that section is going to listen to me because you're all going to be watching him. It's fine. Watch it online. You see, when I think about problem solving, and when we think about that, and I ask the question, are you a problem solver? The engineers in the room, yep, I got it. So just to be fair, and I'm not going to make fun of you, if you would say you fit in the category of, yes, I am a problem solver, raise your hand. Okay, and if you fit in the other category, nope, not a problem solver, raise your hand. See, you can't even figure out how to raise your hands. Like that, it's easy. We instantly oftentimes put ourselves in these two different categories. When you look at it from a spiritual perspective or a life issue, when it's bigger than something you can just Google, like how do you figure it out? How do you begin to problem solve? You go to people that you think know how to solve the problem and hope that they'll fix the problem for you so that you can move on from said problem. There's a passage in Proverbs verse 3, and this is for those of you that raised your hand that said, I know how to solve problems, I'm good at it. Trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one who will keep you on track. Don't assume that you know it all. Run to God. Run from evil. There's certain passages that I hold on to my life because they speak to me. That's not one of them because I don't know how to figure out a lot of stuff. But for those of you that sit in that category, it's wisdom. Go back to the other verse. It's wisdom speaking into you saying, don't try to figure this out on your own. Like, don't just trust in your own understanding. Don't just trust in your own strength. Trust in God. Run to him. Don't try to figure out this whole thing on your own. For those of us that are like, yeah, I'm not very good at problem solving, there's this passage in James that says this. It says, if any of you needs wisdom, you should ask God for it. God is generous. He enjoys giving to all people. So God will give you wisdom. Every time before I stand on the stage, whether I'm speaking, doing announcements, whatever it is, I stand right back there behind that door. And I just stand there for a minute and I said, God, I just pray that you will give, are you kidding me? Like, you had 26 more minutes. Like, so figure out your life. Thank you very much. Here's the dream that I had this week. I'm like, it'd be really cool if while I'm talking, I solve this and I'm doing two things at once. Just so you know, there's lots of things happening in my head while I'm speaking, but trying to do this thing, it didn't work. I was gonna, at the end of my sermon, just put it down and walk off stage, but thank you. What was I saying? James 1, something, solving it. Oh, I stand right back there. And every single time, I say, God, I pray that you will give me words that are actually words. Thank you. One or two people understood that because with Paul, there's issues. I pray that you will give me clarity of speech, and I pray that you will give me wisdom. You see, when we go through life, it's really not that hard to stop and pause and say, God, I pray that you give me wisdom right now. I pray that you'll give me words right now. I pray that you allow me to trust in you. You see, when you have a problem, we look at that problem and we run from that problem. But when you take a deeper look, and when you look deeper at problems, what you realize is that there's always more to the problem than the actual problem. And what I mean by that is when you look at whatever this issue is, it could be anything from somebody that's struggling with life or making decisions or a struggle or a work thing. Whatever it is, as you're pulling back the onion, as they say, you begin to see, well, this problem is because of this problem. And that is because of this. And then this here started, and you just can keep going back. But what we try to do as humans, specifically some of us that love to solve the problems, is we take a step into that first one and go, okay, let's look deeper. Okay, let's solve that. If we solve that, forget all of this. Now we can move on. We fixed it. But what happens is, when you look into the problem, again, I'm talking life issues, struggles, you have to look deeper. You have to ask the questions of, why are you asking this question? How did this happen? Where did it come from? You see, in Nehemiah chapter 1, Nehemiah is just this guy. He's just got this regular job, and he's just going through life. But life kind of hits him. This is shortly after the Israelites had been in exile. And it says the memoirs of Nehemiah. In the month of Kislev, which is November, December-ish, in the 20th year of something, at the time I was in the palace complex at Susa. So Nehemiah is either a person of influence, he's a somebody, or he knows somebody of influence. For whatever reason we don't really know, the writer thinks it's important to tell us he's in the palace. He's in the palace. Hanani, one of my brothers, had just arrived from Judah with some fellow Jews. Code word, my brother just came from our former home, the place that our ancestors came from. I asked them about the conditions among the Jews there who had survived the exile and about Jerusalem. And they told me the exile survivors who are left there in the province are in bad shape. Conditions are appalling. The wall of Jerusalem is still rubble. The city gates are still in cinders. You see, what happens when he's writing that, he's asking them a simple question: what is life like? And I think if you look behind it, if you pull the onion back, what he's saying is, can we go home? Like, is our home still in good condition? Is it still a place that we can go and learn and live and start over? What is it like? And he hears that the problem is so much deeper. There's so much more to it than he could ever experience. In verse 3 there at the bottom, it says, the wall of Jerusalem is still in rubble. The city gates are still in cinders. Everything has burned up. You see, what happens, as I said, we try to solve problems or figure it out so that we can move on from the problem. But sometimes the biggest part of the problem is sitting in it and being a part of it and learning and growing in those moments. And Nehemiah, as he's sitting there listening, he understands that this is so much deeper. You see, when a life struggle happens, if you're not asking the questions, you're missing a lot of the journey. I've been reading the biography of Leonardo da Vinci and also studying Albert Einstein. And one of the things they say about those two guys specifically is they had childlike thoughts, but they were always asking questions. Leonardo da Vinci was asking, what does a hummingbird's tongue look like? Like, these are questions like who cares? And whoever thinks of that? But there's this list. They have these lists of questions that these guys used to ask. You see, the most curious minds are often the most brilliant. And Nehemiah begins to ask the questions, why is it like this? If you look at even Jesus, how he was as a leader, people would come and touch him, and he would instantly ask, who touched me? And he would stop people and say, where are you going? Why are you coming before me? What do you expect to get from this moment? How can I help you? Do you believe that I can do the impossible? Why do you have the faith that is just not bigger than what you have? You see, Jesus was always asking questions, and when people came and asked him to fix their problems, he instantly would ask those questions of why. What do you hope to get out of it? Where will this take you on this journey? What have you learned through this season of pain? And when you begin to look deeper, what it does is you can't help it. You begin to feel it. You begin to feel the problems, the issues, the pain, the struggle. You feel that. The person that is brought before you, you feel all of this. See, in Nehemiah, he goes on and he says this. He's just heard it. He's just mortified. And he says, when I heard this, I sat down and I wept. I mourned for days fasting and praying before the God of heaven. Have you ever been with somebody when they receive bad news that they, as you can tell, you don't know what's going on, but they're on the phone and all of a sudden they just drop to the ground and they start to cry? Or those moments when something happens, when it just breaks you. See, Nehemiah says he sat on the ground and he wept and he mourned for days. And I said, God, he prayed to God, God of heaven, the great and awesome God, loyal to his covenant and faithful to those who love him and obey his commands. Look at me. Listen to me. Pay attention to this prayer of your servant that I'm praying day and night in intercession for your servants, the people of Israel, confessing the sins of the people of Israel. And I'm including myself and my ancestors among those who have sinned against you. Make me successful today so that I get what I want from the king. I was cupbearer to the king. So there's a lot right there. That last line, I was cupbearer to the king. So now he exposes and tells everybody what his job is. And if you really dive deep on this, he was a servant. He worked for the king. And his only job was, the king's wine is ready. Hold on. And then you wait a couple minutes. And if he dies, he did his job really well. If he doesn't die, he lives to do this another day. So his job was simply to be there with the king and make sure the king doesn't die. And it says in the passage that Nehemiah was broken. He was on his knees before God. And we realize that Nehemiah is, in his mind, a nobody. But he's in the same room as a somebody. And he's right next to him consistently. And so it says that in verse 6, I'm praying day and night, intercession for your servants, the people of Israel. I'm praying day and night in intercession for your servants. Have you ever had a problem or a struggle and you realize that you need to begin to pray for whatever this is? You know, when you pray for your kid, you pray for your spouse. You pray for health from the person that is struggling. You pray for your neighbor. You pray for your neighborhood. You pray for your city, for your state, for your country. If you're doing that, you don't just do a passing prayer. You pray deeply. You pray longingly. You pray oftentimes in tears. You pray to the point where you just are broken. You see, you begin to feel it. You know, what I've realized is if you want to be a problem solver on a global scale, it says that Nehemiah was praying day and night. And as Westerners, we want to fix the problem. We want to solve the problem. We want the answers right now. The reason we want that is so that we can just simply move on and leave it behind. But when you pray for something, God, I pray that you will give me wisdom. God, I pray that you will help me in this situation. God, I pray that you will pray for my spouse, for my child, for whatever it is. We're making ourselves humble before our maker, our creator, before God, and we're saying, God, I want, and I feel like this is something that we need to be a part of. Allow me to be a part of that. But I think there's also a whole other group that is saying, God, I feel alone. I pray that you will send somebody to be with me. God, this pain is so much, I don't even know how I can handle this alone. God, I'm praying for so-and-so to come and go through life with me. You see, when you pray for something, you have to feel it because it begins to change you. And the burden, the heaviness, the struggle, the whatever it is now shared. So then the next step is simply to step into it. Like you can't pray for something and not step into it. You have to become a part of the story, a part of the burden, a part of the journey, a part of whatever that issue is. Nehemiah begins to pray with all of his heart. It says in verse 2, it says, in the month of Nisan, in Toyota, whichever one you prefer, April. So it's approximately 4 months later that he's been praying for this. In the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I took the wine. I took a little sip. I didn't die. I brought it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you're not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? The king said to me, what is it you want? Then I prayed to God of heaven, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried so I can rebuild it. Then the king said, with the queen sitting beside him, and he asked me, how long will your journey take? When will you get back? And I gave him a time, and the king gave his approval and sent me. You see, I think Nehemiah had been praying for this moment. Because the king says to him, what is it you want? And then he stops and he prays again. I don't think he stopped and closed his eyes and stood there for a while the king looked at him. It's like, what is going on right now? I think he just took that moment again. You know, this is the thing that I've been praying for and waiting for and asking for God to show up and to make it clear that I'm supposed to step into this problem instead of just talking about it and praying about it. And the king looks at him and asks him, what is it you want? He instantly had an answer. I need to go to this place and rebuild. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I need your blessing to go and be a part of that. You see, what he was doing for 4 months was praying. He was down on his knees asking. He was planning and he was dreaming. And I think sometimes God gives us dreams that we're supposed to step into, but we stand on the sidelines because we're afraid of what if it all goes south. And so the problem that we're afraid to step in reality was a blessing all along, but we didn't have the courage to move into that. And so we missed that blessing. And so Nehemiah, when his moment came, he steps into it. God, this is what you've prayed, this is what I've been praying for. The king has asked me, here's my plan. And if you read the book of Nehemiah, you'll see that he steps into it. He goes and he begins to rebuild the wall, but he doesn't really know how to do most of the stuff. He trusts that God will bring people along on his journey. At the very end of the book, he says, God, please remember me, because he feels defeated, because it didn't turn out exactly how he thought. And yet he still stepped into the problem. So if you know me, you've heard me tell stories about the Oasis. It's a community center downtown Chandler that we've been working on for years and years and years. And obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, for years we've felt like, okay, we're getting ready to start. Okay, not yet, cancer. Getting ready to start. Okay, not yet, COVID. Getting ready to start. Okay, prices have gone through the roof. Getting ready to start, problem after problem after issue after issue. It got to the point, honestly, where in December, my wife and I started to pray, is this something we're really supposed to step into? Like, God, is this of you, or is this something that we just want to accomplish? Is it something that we want to place into this community? On the flip side of that, you can go, well, we sat with the community for years. We've talked about this, dreamt about this. A safe place for kids, a place to bring people, a place to have quinceañeras, a place that's right in the middle of the community where kids can run to after school and have a place where they're safe for 2 or 3 hours. That's not a bad dream. And yet, why are we constantly hitting roadblock after roadblock after roadblock? It gets to the point sometimes where you feel defeated and you second guess and you say to yourself, yeah, I don't think this was supposed to. So we started praying, should we quit? Like, is this the wrong path that we're on? And we were sincere. I mean, it was to the point of in tears of, I don't know if we should do this. Maybe I led us down a crazy trail again. So in that process, and when you are problem solving, it's never the instant solution. It's always a slow kind of nudging where things are happening and prayers are answered and you read from Scripture and conversations with friends and people from the community. And so we just stepped into it. And I said, okay, there is this guy named Eric. Eric, years ago, helped us build a couple houses downtown. Eric used to sit right up there. He moved away, and I didn't see him for years. And I said, okay, if Eric is at church, and Eric says to me, hey, Paul, how's it going? Then I'll say, hey, Eric, how's it going? And then if Eric says, hey, when are we going to start the Oasis? I'll say, oh, funny you should ask. How about we start now? And he'll say, okay. Like, that's the narrative I had in my mind. That's the world that I live in. So I talked to my wife, Mel, and I were talking about this and praying about this. Christmas Eve, I'm walking along, and I need you to understand, for me, God isn't just this magic potion. It's not this thing. It's not this amazing thing. It's years of anguish and prayers and crying and tears and, I failed. And then you get to this point where, like, I got nothing left. I need a miracle. And then as I'm walking, Christmas Eve, it's busy, Christmas Eve, Friday night, whatever it was. I'm getting ready, I'm walking down, and Eric is sitting right over there. And I stopped and I just stared at Eric because I just was it was mind blown. And he said, hey, Paul, how are you? And this is a true story. I said, hey, Eric, how are you? And he looked at me, he goes, you started the Oasis yet? And I said, no, we're money, all kinds of issues. We should just start it. Really? Yeah, I'm back in town. I moved back. Let's start the Oasis. We don't have enough. Who cares? Let's just go. You want to have coffee? Yes, please. This is a video from last week. There's a foundation now. Like, now you're clapping because you don't have to pay for the rest of it. But I look at this as like, this is my Jerusalem walls. Like, I don't know how to build this thing. I don't know how to pay for this thing. I don't know how any of this is going to happen. But God, if you're going to do this, then good luck, because I'm done. I can't go any farther. Now, we didn't even have a groundbreaking ceremony because we just were like, forget it, let's just do it, let's just go. And we realized, we started too soon. So now this Wednesday, we're having a construction celebration. Every single one of you are invited to 482 East Erie Street this Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. There's Elmer's, and if you don't know what Elmer's is, I'll pray for you because you need more Jesus in your life. But I would invite you to come and just pray over this land and see what we're dreaming and meet some of our neighbors and help pay for it. And be just a part of this journey. More so, I honestly don't care about the money. That stuff always works out. It's the story. It's the power of Jesus changing things and moving people. And it's the idea of this thing right here. For me, I've told some people, if this is not built, there's some kids that I can tell you, 100% these kids will be in gangs. Like, they're already on the cusp of it. This is so needed. We've had people in our neighborhood say, Paul, we need this built now. You see, years upon years upon years of stepping into it and getting stuck, and then stepping into it and getting stuck again, and then stepping into it and getting stuck. But what I've realized is faith and decision-making really isn't that hard. When you get stuck, you get down on your knees and you pray. You see, we have passages like Jeremiah 29:11. You have these on your walls in your house, and it says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in a future. I buy into all of that, 100%. And yet at the same breath, I'm like, so hard, because it's not just this Christian faith where we're skipping through the meadow and everything is perfect and great. Because you know what? Sometimes cancer does happen. Sometimes your spouse does die. Sometimes your kids do run away. Sometimes addiction does take over all of you. Sometimes horrific things happen, and then you have the person that comes to you, well, I know God knows the plans that he has for you. He's not going to harm you, so just pray. It's going to be great. And you just want to punch them in the face with the most Jesus-y feeling in your life. How you like them apples? And you're like, you see, what happens is we trivialize our faith and we make it this connect the dots thing. Well, if I accept Jesus into my heart, then the bad things aren't going to happen to me anymore, and the struggles aren't going to be real, and I'm going to surround myself with people that look like me and act like me and talk like me and think like me, and then before you know it, you're on this magic carpet that is guaranteed to crash. It's just not going to work out. We live in a world of sin, of pain, of just ridiculous destruction. And that's not the answer. If you keep reading the passage, you see, we find a good passage and we go, oh, I love that. It makes me feel good about my life. The next verse, then, if you want these things, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope in the future, then you will call on me, and then you will come to me, and then you will pray to me, and then I will listen. You will seek me and find me, and when you seek me with all of your heart, I will be found by you, declares the Lord. You see, it's not this, God, can you please help me out in this situation? It's, I am down on my knees, screaming and yelling and struggling, and like, God, I'm just at the absolute end of my rope. And sometimes you still don't get the answer. That doesn't mean that God isn't real. That means we live in a broken world. You see, today is Pentecost. Pentecost is 50 days after Jesus rose into heaven. And on that day, it said God's Spirit came upon all the disciples and all the people that were gathered there. You see, if you look back on the story of faith, on the story of pursuing Jesus, in the very beginning there were priests, and you went to the priests and they would bring your requests to God. And then you went to the prophets. The prophets came next, and you would go and the prophet would talk to God. And then God sent his son, Jesus. And while Jesus was on earth, he said there was something better that's coming. I have to die for this reason. And oftentimes I listen to things like this, and I'm like, this all sounds crazy. But if I wouldn't have experienced it in my own life, I wouldn't understand the depth of when he says the Spirit will come upon you. And I think we have to get into a place in our problem solving where we're looking to God's Spirit guiding us. And we're attuned to his hope and his love and his joy and his presence. You see, if you want to lead well, if you want to be a problem solver, then you need to look deeper into pretty much everything you're doing in life. And you need to feel the pain and the passions and the cries and the destruction and the joy and the hope of everything that's happening. And when God calls you, you have to step into it. It's not a choice. I mean, the beauty of it is you could stay here and have that incomplete journey, or you could step into this. You see, the Rubik's Cube for me, this last week, I did get a Rubik's Cube that was close to this. I had these 4 corners that weren't done. On Thursday, I sat in my office and worked on my Rubik's Cube because it was sermon prep. Sue me. So as I'm working on my Rubik's Cube, I get it almost done, and I come home, and I drop it down on the counter. I said, look, I almost solved the Rubik's Cube. And then my grandson picked it up and went, and put it back down, and I thought, I'm never going to get this back. But the reason I figured it out was I sat at my computer, and I Googled it. And I pulled up the instructions, and I held it exactly how they told me to hold it. And I looked at it, and I started following their diagram. And I never looked at the Rubik's Cube. I stared at the computer the whole time. And I would get to the next point. I look, okay, it looks the same. Next one, then I'd follow. And I just kept doing this for, a couple days, I'll be honest with you. It's like 4 minutes. And I got to the point where it was literally almost done. And like I said, my dream was to come up here, solve it, drop it. That's not who I am. Like, I can't figure this out. I could watch these things all day long, and I'm just wasting my life. But at the end, I figured out 2 things. I never looked at the problem. I looked past the problem. You see, we get so stuck in looking in our problems that we miss everything that God is sending around us. And in reality, when you're looking at him, when you're asking those other people around you that are saying, I'm here to walk through this with you. I'm ready. I'll do this with you. I will walk through life. Stop staring at your problem and start looking at your Creator. The other thing I looked at when I was doing this, I got a little frustrated this week, so I went back to my roots and I tore it apart and I put it back together. And every time you do that, it weakens it. You've got 5 or 6 destructions, and then this thing's worthless. You see, when you sit in the middle of the pain or the problem or the struggle, you grow, you learn, you have a deeper understanding of pain, and you can step into that next part of that journey. When you take those shortcuts, you miss that growth opportunity. So the question isn't, God, why are you doing this to me? The question is, God, what can I learn from this? How can I grow? And I am been in that place as my wife is sitting there curled up with cancer. I understand the pain. And it's not a simple question. But Jesus always said, have the faith of a child. He always was saying, look at me. Stop looking at your problems. He is always saying, why did it take you so long to come to me? He's always saying, come and be with me. You see, when we go through life, the reality of it is you just have to look deeper. And whenever you get to that place where you think, okay, I'm deep enough, there's 5, 6 more levels of going deeper. That's the thing I love about faith is you never really get to the end of the journey. You get to the end of this life, but you don't get to the end of the journey. You should continually be growing and being molded and walking with people and being ruined and wrecked. And when that happens, you begin to feel it. You begin to feel the struggle. And because you're feeling it, you're not content with sitting in it. You have to stand in it. You see, then when you stand in it, it gets real. And you can sit there and wait for God to show up, or you can bail. But how you vision and dream of him showing up oftentimes looks so different. So here's what I realized. There's a song they're going to sing. It simply says, God, I'm on my knees again. God, I'm begging you, please. God, I need you. I'm on my knees. I need you. I need you. I need you.